Welcome back to the Deep Dive from the Inside Hub.
Great to be here.
So today we're tackling a subject that honestly is one of the most requested we've ever had. You sent us a mountain of material court filings, old articles, transcripts.
A really complex web of information.
It is, and it all centers on one of the most scrutinized and frankly toxic associations in recent history, the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump.
And our job here, as always, is to stick to what's in those documents. Because what they show isn't just a simple friendship. It's more like a case study.
Case study in what?
In how proximity to power and, extreme wealth operates. On one hand, you have years of public praise of being in the same elite circles. And on the other, you have this frantic, aggressive attempt to deny it all when the association became a liability.
That contradiction is exactly what we're going to trace. We're going to go chronologically, starting with those early days. We'll look at the specific moments and places where their worlds collided.
Right up to the legal and political fallout. And again, this isn't about our opinions. It's about what the source material you've given us actually says. We're just connecting the dots.
Let's start connecting them.
Okay, so before Jeffrey Epstein became this globally infamous figure, his relationship with Trump was, according to sources, pretty well established.
And long-standing. The time frame that keeps coming up is 15 years.
15 years. And that's really important context. It's not a fleeting acquaintance. That puts them together through the 90s and the early 2000s, moving in the same, ultra-elite circles in New York and Palm Beach.
The sources often just flat out describe them as close friends. Is that fair? Or was it more like they were just in the same orbit?
I think the evidence points to something closer than just orbit. Their interactions were constant, they were visible, and they were remarked upon within that very small, very rarefied world.
And not just remarked upon in private. This is what's so wild. It spilled out into the public, which brings us to maybe the most critical piece of evidence from that early period.
You have to be talking about the 2002 New York Magazine article.
Exactly. It's impossible to really understand their dynamic without looking at this specific quote from Trump.
It really is. It sort of fixes their relationship in time publicly. The quote is, and this is Trump speaking about Epstein back in 2002, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy."
Just starts right there. Terrific guy.
He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side.
That part right there.
Yeah.
On the younger side. It's chilling to read that now.
It is. And the quote finishes, "No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life."
So let's really unpack that. Reading it today, it's horrifying. But what did that language mean back then in 2002? What does it say that Trump felt comfortable saying that to a major magazine?
I think it reveals a really chilling level of normalization. It was okay. The phrase, "it is even said," is a tell. It suggests this wasn't some dark secret. It was common knowledge. It was gossip. Maybe even a running joke among their peers. It was part of Epstein's public persona in that circle.
So an open secret.
An open secret that wasn't even really secret. And for Trump to not just mention it, but to tie it to himself, as much as I do, that reinforces the camaraderie, the closeness. It speaks to a culture where, if you have enough money and power, you get a pass.
A public pass for behavior that we now know was deeply, deeply predatory. It's like they were so insulated in that world, they didn't even think to whisper it. They could just put it on the record.
And that shared world was built on a level of wealth that is, frankly, hard for most people to even comprehend.
Right. It wasn't just about going to the same parties. The sources make a point of this, don't they?
They do. They talk about Epstein's private fleet of aircraft, the plane that got that awful nickname, the Lolita Express. And the source material explicitly notes he never flew commercial. It describes him as moving like other wealthy men, including Donald Trump.
That's not a trivial detail, is it? It's about a lifestyle.
It's about a stratosphere. Private jets, exclusive clubs, sprawling estates. That's the world they both inhabited for those 15 years. They were defined by it.
And Epstein was, by all accounts in these documents, aggressively using his connections to powerful people to fuel his own activities.
Absolutely. The sources bring up how he'd reportedly boast about scouting models for Leslie Wexner's Victoria's Secret.
Right.
He would allegedly use that connection to give his pickup line some legitimacy, to make himself seem like a kingmaker. It's an example of how he weaponized his associations.
So their shared status, the social credibility, it wasn't just for luxury. It was, for Epstein, a tool of the trade.
It was the currency. It was the entire foundation that allowed his operation to exist and to thrive. And that brings us from the general social scene to a very specific and very crucial location.
Okay, so now the story shifts. We move from the high society of Manhattan down to Palm Beach, Florida, specifically to Mar-a-Lago.
Trump's exclusive club. And this is a critical pivot in the narrative, because we're not just talking about a place they both happen to be. The documents we have point to it being an actual nexus for Epstein's operation.
A nexus, that's a strong word.
I think it's the right one, because this moves the conversation from just association to a direct connection to the criminal enterprise happening on Trump's property.
You're talking about the recruitment of Virginia Roberts.
Yes. Known in the court documents as Jane Doe 102, and it happened, according to the sources, at Mar-a-Lago in the summer of 2000.
Can you walk us through the circumstances? The documents are,
Yeah.
They're very specific about how Ghislaine Maxwell operated. It's almost cinematic.
It is. So Virginia Roberts was working at the spa inside the club. Her name tag said GNN.
Okay.
And Ghislaine Maxwell sees her at her station reading a book about massage techniques. Maxwell, who was a master of presenting this air of, sophisticated charm.
The sources describe her accent as being out of Masterpiece Theater.
Exactly. That cultivated persona. She uses it to approach Roberts, but not in a creepy way. She frames it as a professional opportunity.
So the bait was her own ambition.
Precisely. It was an appeal to her desire for a better career. Maxwell says she knows a wealthy friend, Jeffrey Epstein, who is looking for a masseuse in training. It sounds legitimate. It sounds exclusive.
And what happens right after that conversation?
The sources are very clear. That same night, Roberts is taken off the property, and the legal complaint alleges that she was sexually abused by both Maxwell and Epstein that very first night.
Wow.
The night her own father dropped her off.
And the sources also mention the money. That seems to be a key part of the mechanism here.
A huge part. It cemented the dynamic immediately. After the assault, she was given hundreds of dollars for the day.
Hundreds of dollars.
And the documents make a point to say this was much more than she was making at Mar-a-Lago. It's this immediate, overwhelming financial reward that serves as the anchor for the entire cycle of exploitation.
So you contrast her modest wages as a spa worker with this huge sum of cash for one day's work.
Right.
It's a trap.
It is, and the sources detail how her life was completely transformed after that one recruitment at Mar-a-Lago. It wasn't a one-time thing.
What does it become?
The documents state she becomes an underage traveling sex slave. Her life is now completely reoriented around Epstein. Maxwell trains her, teaches her how to perform sexually for it.
The details in the complaints they're just horrific. They describe a ritual.
A compulsive nightly routine. The sources allege Maxwell and another girl would strip her, molest her, force her into sexual acts with Maxwell, while Epstein gratified himself. It became the pattern.
This detail is so important because it establishes that this wasn't some casual encounter. This was the documented starting point of a systematic trafficking operation for this one victim.
And it started on Trump's property.
Right, an international operation even.
Absolutely. Because the system wasn't just for Epstein, the source material alleges she was then lent out for sex to his powerful friends.
And they name categories of people.
Yes. Politicians, academics, businessmen, and even royalty. She traveled the world with them. So that initial act of recruitment at Mar-a-Lago becomes the gateway to a global sex trafficking network that services the absolute highest echelons of power.
And that's the pivot point. It takes us out of the purely social world and drops us right into the world of legal liability, political consequences.
Which is exactly where the story goes next. Tag 3, legal and political intersections, the unpacking.
Okay, so now we shift to the legal fallout. This is years later, when the association that was once a point of, casual bragging in a magazine
becomes a massive legal problem.
A huge problem. And it forces Trump's team to engage in some pretty complex maneuvers to try and, minimize the whole thing.
The first big public test of this comes during the civil lawsuits brought by Epstein's victims. This is well before the 2019 media firestorm.
And the lawyers for the victims, they specifically try to involve Trump.
They do. In 2009, they served Donald Trump with a subpoena. Right at Trump Tower in New York. This was a really high-stakes move. A subpoena isn't a request. It's a legal demand for him to give testimony in a formal deposition, under oath.
So the strategy from the victims' attorneys was what? To show the jury the kind of powerful company Epstein kept.
Exactly. To establish the breadth of his network and to force his powerful associates to go on the record about what they knew and when they knew it.
But Trump never actually sat for that deposition, did he?
No. And the documents explain how he avoided it. His lawyer at the time, a man named Alan Garton, he steps in immediately.
And what does he do?
He negotiates. Instead of a formal, on-camera, sworn deposition, which could be a legal minefield, Garton offers an alternative, an informal phone interview with the opposing counsel.
And they accepted that.
They did. You have to assume they knew how hard and how long it would take to legally force a figure like Trump to sit for a deposition. So they took the interview. The sources say Trump himself called the attorney right on time and said something like, "I hear you have some questions about Epstein. How can I help?"
And in that interview, that story of a 15-year friendship.
Yeah.
What happened to it?
It evaporated. The entire goal was damage control. Trump completely downplayed the relationship. He called Epstein a business acquaintance.
From terrific guy to business acquaintance.
A business acquaintance from many years earlier. He said, look, we went to the same party, sure, but we were not as close with Epstein as the media had made it seem. It was a total 180-degree reversal from what he'd said publicly just a few years before.
The lawyer on the phone had that 2002 New York Magazine quote, right? I mean, he must have pushed back.
Oh, he did. The sources confirm the attorney read the quote back to him, contrasted the terrific guy praise with this new business acquaintance line.
So what does that moment show us?
It shows the clear conflict between the public persona and the legal strategy. When things got serious, when there were real legal stakes, the friendship was completely disavowed in favor of plausible deniability.
Okay, so that's the legal thread. But then this whole thing comes roaring back years later on the political stage when Trump is president.
Right. And the connection is a man named Alexander Acosta.
This is where it gets really complicated.
It is. So in 2017, President Trump nominates Alexander Acosta to be his Secretary of Labor. The problem is, Acosta was the former U.S. attorney in Florida who, back in 2008, oversaw Epstein's incredibly controversial non-prosecution agreement, the NPA.
The so-called sweetheart deal.
Yeah.
Can you just remind us what was so controversial about that deal?
Well, it essentially shut down a massive federal investigation into Epstein. It let him plead to minor state charges, serve a ridiculously light sentence. But the most controversial part was that it gave immunity from federal prosecution to Epstein and any potential co-conspirators.
Any potential co-conspirators. So it wasn't just about protecting Epstein.
Critics said it was about protecting his entire network of powerful friends. It was seen as this unprecedented deal that basically shielded a whole group of potential abusers.
So when Trump nominates the guy who engineered that deal?
It puts a giant spotlight right back on the 2008 case. And interestingly, the sources note that Trump's presidency and the Acosta nomination actually worried Epstein.
Why would it worry him? You'd think he'd be happy about it.
You would, but I think the fear was that it would bring new scrutiny. It tied him directly to a high-profile figure in the new administration, which could, kick the hornet's nest.
And that's exactly what happened when Epstein was arrested again in 2019.
Precisely. After that 2019 arrest, the public outcry over Acosta's role in that old deal just became deafening. It was a massive political crisis for the Trump administration.
And Acosta had to resign.
He did. He was out by September 2019. It's just a crystal clear example of how the history between these powerful figures had these long, toxic political consequences.
Beyond the legal and the political, the sources point to another kind of overlap, a financial and technological one.
Yeah, this gets into the really deep networks. The sources talk about an investment Epstein made in an Israeli tech company called Carbine.
And he wasn't the only investor.
No. He invested alongside the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. But the really interesting part for this story is how deeply that company's network was intertwined with Trump's political world.
How so? What are the connections?
Well, the documents list several key people. A major investor in Carbine was Peter Thiel.
The tech billionaire, a huge Trump ally.
A huge Trump ally and donor. Then you have Trey Stevens, a former employee of Thiel's company, Palantir, who was also on Trump's transition team. He was on Carbine's board. And another name is Elliot Till, a real estate developer and a known Trump donor.
So let me get this straight. Even as Trump is publicly trying to distance himself from Epstein, their financial and political networks are still overlapping in this tech company.
That's what the documents suggest. It's more than just social ties. It's shared financial interests in a high-tech sphere.
And Epstein was always fascinated by technology and, intelligence.
Intensely. So here he is, in business, sharing board members and investors with major Trump allies, donors, even a transition team member. It just shows that while the personal story might have been, we haven't talked in 15 years, the deep underlying networks of power and money were still very much connected.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the final act, the all-out war over the public story. #Tag55. Conflicting narratives and public fallout.
So when Epstein is arrested again in 2019, the relationship becomes, it's politically radioactive.
Completely toxic.
So what we see is this full-scale PR offensive to just sever any and all ties. And that leads to some pretty incredible contradictions with the known facts.
Let's start with how their friendship actually ended, at least at Mar-a-Lago. Because the sources give us two very different stories for why Epstein was banned from the club.
Right. They both agree he was kicked out, but they disagree profoundly on the why.
So what's version one, the official version?
Version one, the narrative put out by the White House after the 2019 arrest, was that Epstein was expelled for being a creep. Trump himself had previously said something about Epstein having took people that worked for me and that he told him to stay the hell out of here.
Okay, so that frames it as kind of a workplace issue. He was poaching staff or harassing them and got banned for breaking the rules.
Yeah.
It sounds almost professional.
It does. It contains the problem. But then you have version two.
And this one is far more explosive.
Far more. This comes from a 2019 email that Epstein allegedly sent to the author Michael Wolff right around the time of his final arrest.
And what does Epstein claim in this email?
He offers a completely different story. He claims that Trump knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop.
Whoa! Let's just pause on that. Knew about the girls.
Yeah.
That's a whole different ballgame from being a creep.
It's a universe away. If that email is real, it implies direct knowledge of the criminal activity. It suggests the ban from Mar-a-Lago wasn't about some personnel dispute. It was about trying to contain a known problem involving underage girls.
So why would Epstein send that? Was it leverage? Revenge?
You have to assume it's one or the other. He's facing life in prison. He's being completely abandoned by everyone. And he sends this message that basically says, you're not as clean as you say you are. He's trying to pull his old associate down with him.
So you have these two totally conflicting stories about why the relationship ended.
And that leads us to the most blatant contradiction of all, which is the complete rewriting of the timeline.
This is the part that's just mathematically impossible.
It really is. After the 2019 arrest, Trump goes on the record and directly contradicts his own statement from 2002.
Back in 2002, he says, I've known Jeff for 15 years.
Right. But in 2019, he says, I hadn't talked to him in 15 years.
So if you do the math, that means their last conversation would have been around 2004.
Exactly. A cutoff date that conveniently places the end of their friendship long before Epstein's first arrest, long before the 2009 subpoena where he had to give that interview.
It's just a strategic lie. It's an attempt to wipe the slate clean. We have documentary evidence of their connection in 2000 at Mar-a-Lago, the quote in 2002, the legal intervention in 2009.
But the 2019 public statement just ignores all of that. And for you, the listener, this is such a key insight into how these things work. The historical record is just discarded in favor of a new, cleaner story that minimizes political damage. It's not about truth, it's about liability.
Now, the sources also bring up some context here about why this association was seen as so immediately suspicious by so many people. It includes allegations about Trump's own past behavior.
Yes, and we have to be clear, as the sources are, that these are allegations and public perceptions from the time. But they are part of the story. The material mentions that many suspected Trump was into young'uns and points to his behavior at his teen pageants in Atlantic City.
What's specific?
The allegation contained in the sources is that he was a grown man busting into the dressing rooms unannounced of teen girls. Again, this is an allegation contained in the source material we were provided.
So the relevance of that is what?
It's thematic. It's that in the public consciousness, both men were associated with environments involving young, vulnerable women pageants, modeling, massage therapy. Both were accused of using their power in those environments in predatory ways. So when their close friendship came to light, for some observers, it fit a pattern. It didn't seem surprising.
And this brings us to the most recent chapter in all of this, from 2025, the whole controversy around the Epstein list.
Right. This shows just how politically toxic the name Epstein remains, especially within the Republican base, where all these conspiracy theories took root.
There was this very strong belief among many of his supporters that Epstein had this secret blackmail list of powerful people, the Epstein list, and they were demanding that the government release the files.
They were. And so in 2025, former Attorney General Pam Bondi, a Trump ally, releases this official memo.
What was the goal of the memo?
to kill the conspiracy theory once and for all, to dispel all allegations. The memo states, in no uncertain terms, that there was no evidence of any blackmail list. It also reaffirmed the official finding that Epstein's death was a suicide. It was an attempt by an ally to just close the book.
But his base didn't accept it.
No. They kept demanding the files. And Trump's reaction, it was stunning.
What did he do?
He went on social media and just attacked his own supporters. He called them stupid, foolish, even past supporters for continuing to push this. He said the whole list conspiracy was a hoax perpetrated by Democrats.
That's incredible. He was willing to turn on his most loyal followers over this. Why?
It shows you how dangerous he believed it was to let the Epstein story continue to have life.
Yeah.
The political risk of being associated with it, even through a supportive conspiracy theory, was so great that he was willing to alienate his own base just to shut it down.
It's not just denial then. It's an active, aggressive, ongoing effort to control the narrative.
Exactly. An effort that requires high-level memos and even sometimes sacrificing your own supporters to make sure the official story is the only one that's heard. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, this has been, well, a true deep dive. We've gone from high society praise to secret legal maneuvers to open political warfare. If we have to boil it all down for our listener, what are the absolute core takeaways from all these documents?
I think there are three. First, the historical record is undeniable. There was a real, close, and very public 15-year association, highlighted by that 2002 quote where Epstein's preference for younger women was treated like a casual known fact. That can't be erased.
Okay, that's one. The early closeness is a fact.
Second, the connection to the actual crime is documented. The sources put Ghislaine Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago, recruiting Virginia Roberts directly into the trafficking ring on Trump's property. That physical link is there.
The social world provided the hunting ground.
It did. And third, the pattern of disassociation is systematic and contradictory. You see it shift from legal minimization in 2009 to an outright public denial of the timeline in 2019, and finally to that 2025 attack on his own base to just kill the story for good.
Public praise, to legal minimization, to absolute denial.
That's the arc.
So for you, the learner, listening to this, I think the real insight is in looking at the friction. The friction between the public stories and the private legal strategies. The real truth of these relationships among the powerful often lives in the gaps between what they say when it's safe and what they do when they're in trouble.
And this whole saga really highlights how easily and effectively powerful people can use their immense resources, legal and political, to try and reshape the past. It leaves you with a really tough question.
Which is?
What is the real value of the testimony from a victim like Virginia Roberts, who risked literally everything to tell her story? When you compare it to the carefully crafted, legally vetted statements from the powerful men who want those stories buried.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does a good legal strategy actually succeed in hiding the truth about who knew what and when they knew it? The documents tell one story of a long friendship that blew up in scandal, but the official record, the one managed by lawyers and press secretaries, tells a completely different sanitized one.
And the question that remains is whether our systems, the courts, the media, are actually equipped to cut through that kind of powerful obfuscation.
A question we'll have to keep asking. This has been a complex but absolutely necessary analysis.
It certainly has.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive here at the Insight Hub. We'll be back soon.